The mid-14th century. A darkness descended upon Europe unlike anything ever witnessed. From the bustling port cities to the quietest hamlets, a terrifying specter stalked the land, the Black Death. Its arrival was swift, its grip merciless, its outcome almost invariably fatal. Cities became graveyards, families were annihilated, and the very fabric of society began to unravel. Across the continent, it was a dance with death, an incomprehensible scourge that, within just a few years, would claim the lives of an estimated one-third of the population. Fear was a palpable entity breathing down every neck. No cure existed, no escape seemed possible. The plague was an unstoppable force, a divine judgment, a cruel and random lottery where death held all the winning tickets. Panic bred flight, and flight often spread the very horror people sought to escape. But amidst this unfathomable despair, in a small, unassuming valley tucked away in the English countryside, a remarkable story was about to unfold. Faced with the relentless march of the pestilence, one community made an extraordinary decision, a choice born of both desperation and an astonishing sense of civic duty. They chose not to flee, not to scatter and potentially doom others, but to draw a line in the sand. This is the untold saga of a village that willingly sealed itself off from the outside world, transforming their homes into a crucible of courage and sacrifice. It is a profound testament to the human spirit's capacity for altruism in the face of absolute terror, offering a beacon of hope and a timeless lesson in survival. Join us as we journey back in time to discover the village that defied death. The mid-14th century, a time of both burgeoning trade and profound vulnerability. Across Europe, vibrant cities like London, Paris, and Florence hummed with life, their markets overflowing, their populations swelling. Yet, beneath this veneer of prosperity lay a continent teetering on the edge. Medical knowledge was rudimentary, sanitation virtually non-existent, and social inequalities created densely packed, unsanitary living conditions ripe for disaster. For centuries, disease had been an unwelcome guest, but none could have predicted the scale of the horror that was about to unfold. This interconnected world, with its bustling ports and winding trade routes, was unknowingly laying the perfect groundwork for a catastrophe that would redefine human history, leaving its people utterly unprepared for the invisible enemy approaching their shores. This was no ordinary sickness. The terror that arrived was the Black Death, primarily the bubonic plague, a scourge caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. It was a silent assassin, carried by fleas that infested rats, creatures that thrived in the squalor of medieval towns. Once it took hold, the disease was swift and merciless. Victims would first experience a sudden onset of fever, chills, vomiting, and excruciating pain. Then, the telltale symptom, grotesquely swollen, black lesions, buboes appearing in the groin, armpits, and neck. The buboes would weep pus and blood, signaling the body's losing battle. Death often followed within days, a horrific, agonizing end. It was a disease that offered no mercy, no escape, its biological mechanism unknown to those it consumed. From the steppes of Central Asia, the plague began its relentless march. Carried along the ancient Silk Road by merchants and their goods, then by ships crisscrossing the Mediterranean, it reached European shores in 1347. Messina, Sicily, was among the first to fall, swiftly followed by Genoa, Venice, and Marseille. The disease spread like wildfire, engulfing entire cities in weeks. With no understanding of contagion, people fled, unknowingly carrying the infection with them, accelerating its spread. Within 5 years, from 1347 to 1352, an estimated 75 to 200 million people perished, wiping out a third, perhaps even half, of Europe's population. It spared no one, lord or peasant, young or old, rich or poor, a terrifying, indiscriminate force of nature. As death counts soared, The very fabric of medieval society began to unravel. Fear became a constant companion, mutating into paranoia and distrust. Communities fractured as healthy individuals abandoned the sick, and even family members turned away from dying loved ones. Law and order crumbled, replaced by opportunistic looting and desperate acts. Amidst the chaos, superstition flourished. Some believed the plague was divine punishment, leading to a surge in religious extremism, with groups like the Flagellants scourging themselves publicly to appease God. Others sought scapegoats, accusing Jewish communities of poisoning wells, sparking brutal pogroms. This was not just a medical crisis. It was a profound psychological and social collapse, plunging Europe into its darkest hour, where humanity itself seemed to teeter on the brink. But amidst this continent-wide despair, one small, isolated corner of England remained untouched, at least for a time. Tucked away in the rugged, verdant Peak District of Derbyshire was the village of Eyam. Surrounded by rolling hills, steep valleys, and dense woodlands, Eyam was by nature secluded. Its modest stone cottages, winding lanes, and ancient church stood as if in a forgotten pocket of time. Life here was dictated by the rhythms of agriculture, lead mining, and cloth production. This geographical isolation, which had for centuries preserved its unique character and traditions, would soon become both its greatest strength and its ultimate challenge. Eyam was a community that lived on the periphery, largely unaware of the storm raging beyond its natural defenses. In Eyam, life was woven from the strong threads of family and communal spirit. This wasn't a collection of individuals, but a true community. Generations had lived and worked the same land, sharing both hardship and harvest. Farmers tended their sheep on the hillsides, lead miners toiled beneath the earth, and weavers skillfully crafted cloth from the village's wool. Every face was familiar, every story known. Marriages, births, and deaths were shared experiences, binding the villagers in an unbreakable tapestry of mutual reliance and established customs. Their days were simple, yet rich in the connection they shared, a collective heartbeat that pulsed through their daily routines. It was this deep-rooted sense of belonging, this unwavering solidarity, that would ultimately be tested beyond imagination. As the Black Death ravaged Europe, its devastating echoes reached Eyam only as distant, often disbelieved whispers. The villagers, cocooned by their geographical isolation, continued their lives much as they always had. News traveled slowly, distorted by rumor and distance. Tales of entire towns emptied, of bodies piled high, seemed too horrific, too fantastical to be true in their peaceful valley. The harvest came and went, the seasons turned, and the daily rhythm of work and worship remained undisturbed. Eyam was an island of unblemished tranquility in a sea of despair, its inhabitants blissfully unaware that the unstoppable force consuming the continent was creeping ever closer, preparing to breach their quiet sanctuary. Their innocence, though soon to be shattered, would make their coming ordeal all the more poignant. Then, in the late summer of 1665, the illusion of safety was irrevocably shattered. It wasn't a fleeing refugee or a traveling merchant who brought the plague to Eyam. It was an unassuming package. A parcel of cloth, ordered from London, arrived for the village tailor, George Vickers. Unbeknownst to anyone, this innocuous bundle harbored a silent, deadly cargo: fleas teeming with Yersinia pestis. Vickers, a humble, hard-working man, opened the package, perhaps admiring the fabric. Within days, he was the first to fall ill, succumbing to the gruesome symptoms. The invisible enemy had found its way into Eyam, not with a roar, but with a whisper, carried on the back of a tiny insect. The world of this remote village had just changed forever. In the quiet, verdant valleys of rural England, far removed from the bustling trade routes, lay communities that believed themselves safe from the turmoil of the outside world. One such place was a small, unassuming village, nestled amidst rolling hills. Then, in the late summer of 1348, an unseen terror began to whisper through its lanes. The first deaths were met with confusion, then a chilling sense of déjà vu. The familiar, horrifying symptoms of the great sickness, raging fevers, agonizing swellings, mirrored the gruesome tales filtering in from distant cities. Yet, how could this indiscriminate killer have found its way to their remote haven? A collective disbelief, a desperate wish for it to be a common affliction, initially masked the unspeakable truth. The Black Death had arrived. But the reprieve of disbelief was tragically short-lived. What began as an unsettling mystery quickly escalated into a terrifying reality. Within days, more fell ill, and the grim procession to the churchyard became a daily, then hourly, ritual. The disease's brutal efficiency was laid bare. A vibrant neighbor one morning, a fevered corpse by nightfall. Panic, a cold, insidious dread, began to choke the village. The once bustling streets grew eerily silent, save for the wails of the bereaved and the desperate cries of the dying. Every cough, every ache, every shadow seemed to carry the plague's chilling promise. Hope, a precious commodity, evaporated under the relentless onslaught, replaced by profound despair and the stark, mounting tally of death. As death stalked every lane and darkened every doorway, a primal urge surged through the survivors to flee, to abandon homes, livelihoods, and memories, all for the slim chance of outrunning the unseen enemy. Families began to gather meager possessions, their eyes wide with terror, ready to escape the suffocating grip of the plague. Yet a profound moral dilemma arose, chilling them to their core. To leave meant to carry the pestilence, inadvertently spreading it to the surrounding towns and cities, condemning countless more to the same horrifying fate. It was a choice between selfish survival and an agonizing duty to humanity, a burden almost too heavy to bear for a community already crumbling under grief. In this moment of profound crisis, when hope seemed a fleeting memory, two figures of immense courage stepped forward to guide the tormented community. Rector William Mompesson, the current spiritual leader of the village, Eyam, and his revered predecessor, Thomas Stanley, became the unlikely beacons in the darkness. Mompesson, still new to Eyam, faced an impossible task. Stanley, beloved by the villagers, brought gravitas and trust. Together, they understood the horrific implications of flight. With clear eyes and unwavering faith, they began to articulate a vision, a desperate gamble that defied all instinct, not to run, but to stand firm. Their leadership was not just spiritual. It was fiercely pragmatic, urging a path of unimaginable sacrifice. The proposal was stark, unimaginable, to sever all ties with the outside world. Inspired by the resolute conviction of Mompesson and Stanley, the villagers of Eyam gathered, their hearts heavy, yet their resolve hardening. The decision was made. They would seal themselves within their valley, a living tomb, to contain the plague and prevent its insidious march to nearby towns and cities, to Sheffield, Manchester, and beyond. It was a vow of self-imprisonment, an act of unparalleled selflessness. Each person present understood the grim implications. By choosing to stay, they were almost certainly choosing death for themselves and their families, but life for countless others who would never know their names. This was Eyam's ultimate sacrifice. To agree to such a fate required a unity of spirit rarely witnessed in history. The villagers of Eyam, bound by their solemn vow, transformed into a collective organism driven by an extraordinary sense of duty. Personal grief and fear were subsumed by a shared understanding of their grim mission, to protect humanity. They moved through their days with a newfound, albeit tragic, purpose. Neighbors cared for the sick without hope of recompense, simply out of love and a shared burden. This wasn't merely survival. It was an act of profound, collective courage. In the face of overwhelming despair, Eyam's people chose unity, embracing their fate not as victims, but as guardians of a greater good. With their solemn vow made, the abstract concept of isolation now demanded a physical manifestation. The villagers set about the somber task of drawing the line, establishing a cordon sanitaire around Eyam. Stones were laid, ropes strung, and simple markers erected at every road and path leading into or out of the valley. These weren't fortifications, but rather stark reminders, silent sentinels declaring, "Beyond this point, danger lurks. Beyond this point, our plague must not pass." This physical boundary was a tangible expression of their immense sacrifice, a visible testament to their commitment to contain the horror. It marked not just a geographical division, but a profound moral frontier separating a small community from the fate of a continent. But a vow, however profound, was merely a promise. To ensure its success, it had to be enforced with unyielding vigilance. The villagers of Eyam understood this grim necessity. They organized internal patrols, not to keep outsiders out, but to ensure that no one, driven by desperation or delirium, would inadvertently breach their self-imposed prison. Watchmen stood guard at the newly established markers, their presence a constant reminder of the pact. Food and essential supplies were left at designated points on the boundary by sympathetic outsiders, collected only after the benefactors had retreated. This wasn't just physical containment. It was a rigorous, internal discipline, a testament to Eyam's unwavering commitment to its harrowing, selfless mission. Even as the village prepared to sever its ties, a crucial question remained. How would they survive? The answer lay in an extraordinary pact of trust with the outside world. A system was meticulously devised, designated drop-off points, marked by stone markers far beyond the village's perimeter, would serve as their solitary lifeline. Here, vital supplies, sacks of grain, salted meat, medicinal herbs, even news from the distant towns, would be left. Villagers, led by figures like Rector Mompesson, would then approach with payments, often coins steeped in vinegar, a primitive but potent disinfectant, left in bowls to be collected by traders from the neighboring communities. It was a perilous dance, a silent exchange across an invisible line, where the survival of an entire community hinged on the integrity of strangers and the terrifying knowledge that one misstep could doom them all. This fragile bridge of faith was their only tether to a world rapidly consumed by death. With the final agreements made and the last external visitors sent away, an unnatural quiet descended upon the village. The familiar sounds of distant market chatter, traveling merchants, or the laughter of children playing freely outside the village borders vanished. Instead, a profound, almost sacred silence enveloped them. This was not the peace of solitude, but the heavy stillness of a world cut off, living under the shadow of an invisible, omnipresent threat. Every rustle of leaves, every distant cough, became amplified, echoing in the minds of villagers now acutely aware of their unique, perilous isolation. They were truly alone, a tiny island of humanity in a sea of plague, hoping their sacrifice would be enough to defy the encroaching darkness. The village had become a living tomb, sealed against the very disease that raged unchecked beyond its self-imposed walls. Inside the sealed perimeter, daily life transformed into a grueling battle against dread. Every morning brought with it a fresh wave of anxiety, as villagers awoke to check on family members, praying no new spots or swellings had appeared overnight. The subtle aches and coughs of everyday life now sparked terror, each symptom a potential harbinger of the plague's swift, brutal embrace. And then came the grief. With astonishing speed, the disease claimed its victims. Families watched helplessly as loved ones succumbed, often within days. The village square, once a bustling heart, became a place of hushed movement, as simple, agonizingly private burials became a daily ritual. There was no escape from the relentless cycle of fear, illness, and the profound, compounding sorrow of loss. Each passing soul was a raw wound, a chilling reminder of their shared, terrible predicament. Yet, amidst the harrowing despair, the human spirit flickered, refusing to be extinguished. The very act of sealing themselves off had forged an unbreakable bond. Villagers, though ravaged by fear and loss, demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for compassion and mutual aid. Neighbors left food on doorsteps for families too ill to cook, shared meager resources, and offered silent comfort through a glance or a whispered prayer. There were no strangers here, only fellow sufferers, united in their grim determination. Acts of kindness, born of desperation and deep empathy, became the silent language of survival. This shared ordeal, this collective sacrifice, reinforced their resolve. It wasn't just individual survival they fought for. It was the survival of their entire community, a testament to the enduring power of unity in the face of unimaginable adversity. Survival demanded not only courage but ingenuity. With no access to outside markets, every resource within the village became precious. Food supplies were rigorously rationed, forcing families to innovate with what little they had. Wells were guarded fiercely, and new systems for waste disposal, deep communal pits dug far from homes and water sources, became critical to preventing further contagion within their isolated world. People rediscovered forgotten skills, foraging for wild edibles, mending tools until they could be mended no more, and fashioning rudimentary masks from cloth, soaked in vinegar, in a desperate attempt to filter the air. This was a community forced to adapt on the fly, transforming into an ecosystem of self-sufficiency, constantly battling to maintain hygiene and stretch their dwindling provisions, driven by the primal urge to simply endure. For many, faith was their last bastion against overwhelming despair. Yet, even the comforting rituals of the church were disrupted. With gatherings forbidden, Rector Mompesson, a beacon of strength, found creative ways to minister to his terrified flock. Services were held outdoors, in a natural hollow, with villagers standing at a safe distance from one another, their voices raised in hymns and prayers that echoed through the silent valley. For individuals, however, the spiritual struggle was deeply personal. Some clung to their beliefs with renewed fervor, seeking solace in scripture and prayer. Others grappled with doubt, questioning a God who could allow such suffering. The plague challenged not just their bodies, but their very souls, forcing a profound reevaluation of faith in the crucible of death, where hope was as vital as breath itself. No group suffered more acutely or with less understanding than the children of the village. Their innocent world, once filled with games and the warmth of family, shattered overnight. They watched, confused and frightened, as parents, siblings, and friends were taken by an unseen enemy. Imagine a child, no older than 5, waking to find their parents gone, their familiar home suddenly cold and silent. The loss was often absolute, whole families disappearing, leaving behind bewildered orphans taken in by equally grieving neighbors. Play became a somber affair, their laughter muted, replaced by a quiet vigilance, a haunting awareness of mortality far beyond their years. The plague stole not just lives, but childhoods, leaving an indelible imprint of fear and unimaginable loneliness on the most vulnerable members of the community. Beyond the devastating physical toll of the Black Death, the quarantine inflicted wounds that were unseen, yet equally profound. The constant, gnawing fear of infection, the profound isolation from the outside world, and the relentless, compounding grief created a psychological landscape of extreme duress. Normal social structures fractured. The familiar rhythm of life gave way to a perpetual state of vigilance. Survivors carried the weight of unimaginable loss, burdened by the memories of those they couldn't save. The mental and emotional scars ran deep, etched into the very fabric of their being. Even for those who escaped the plague's physical grasp, life would never truly return to what it was. They would forever be the people of the sealed village, living with the haunted legacy of their extraordinary, terrifying sacrifice. Amidst the overwhelming despair and the chilling tally of the dead, glimmers of humanity still managed to pierce the darkness. In Eyam, where fear could easily have corroded all compassion, incredible acts of selfless kindness emerged. Neighbors, knowing full well the fatal risk, tended to the sick and dying who had no one else. Women would leave meager supplies of food and herbal remedies at the thresholds of infected homes, retreating quickly, yet ensuring no one starved alone. The Reverend William Mompesson, despite burying his own beloved wife, continued to minister to his dwindling flock, offering spiritual comfort and steadfast leadership. These were not grand gestures, but quiet, courageous acts of love and duty, a testament to the indomitable spirit that refused to be extinguished, even as death walked openly through the village streets. As the summer of 1666 wore on, the plague reached its terrifying zenith in Eyam. August became the deadliest month, a relentless siege of suffering and death that tested the villagers' resolve to its absolute limit. The air grew heavy with the stench of sickness and the pervasive silence of empty homes, punctuated only by the mournful toll of the church bell, a sound that became chillingly commonplace, signaling yet another soul lost. Families that had once gathered around warm hearths were decimated, sometimes in a matter of days. Children orphaned, spouses widowed, parents left to bury their own offspring. The sheer scale of loss was overwhelming, a wave of grief that threatened to drown the entire community. Survival felt less like a blessing and more like a cruel lottery, with each dawn bringing the dread question: who would be next? With deaths occurring daily, sometimes multiple times a day, traditional burial practices collapsed under the sheer weight of numbers. The churchyard, usually the solemn resting place, quickly overflowed. Families were forced to become their own grave diggers, burying their loved ones in fields and gardens, wherever the earth could be broken. The most poignant example remains the Riley graves, where Elizabeth Hancock, in just 8 days, buried her husband and 6 children in the desolate moorland above the village. The landscape of Eyam became a sprawling graveyard, crude mounds of earth and rough-hewn stones scarring the once picturesque hills. Each new grave was a fresh wound, a stark, physical reminder of the plague's insatiable hunger, painting a permanent, heart-wrenching picture of a community consumed by grief and loss. Behind the statistics of the lost, behind every grave marker, lay stories of unimaginable personal tragedy. The Hancock family's ordeal is perhaps the most famous, a devastating testament to the plague's merciless grip. In just over a week, Elizabeth Hancock watched helplessly as her husband and 6 of her 7 children succumbed to the disease, leaving her to bury them all, virtually alone, on the desolate hillside known as Riley Graves. Imagine her fortitude, her unbearable sorrow. The Talbot family also suffered immense losses, losing many members in quick succession. These were not anonymous numbers. They were fathers, mothers, children, neighbors. Each death ripped a hole in the fabric of the community, leaving behind not just empty seats, but profound, lasting trauma. Their sacrifices, their suffering, etched into the very soul of Eyam, became the human cost of their extraordinary defiance. When the plague's fury eventually subsided, only a fraction of Eyam's original population remained. From an initial village of approximately 350 people, a mere 83 souls had survived the ordeal. The question of who lived and who died remains a mystery debated by historians and scientists alike. Was it sheer luck? A random twist of fate that spared some while claiming others? Or did some possess a natural genetic immunity to the bubonic plague, a resilience unknowingly passed down through generations? Perhaps a combination of factors, including partial exposure that built some resistance, played a role. The survivors, a small and traumatized remnant, carried not only the scars of loss, but also the unspoken question of why me? A survivor's guilt that would undoubtedly linger for years, tying them irrevocably to the harrowing events of 1665 to 1666. Even as the death count began its agonizingly slow decline through late autumn, the shadow of the plague did not immediately lift. The fear, deeply ingrained, remained a palpable presence in Eyam. Every cough, every fever, every unexplained ache sent a jolt of terror through the community. The decrease in fatalities was gradual, not a sudden cessation, making it difficult for the exhausted villagers to truly believe the end was in sight. They had witnessed too much, suffered too profoundly, to easily shed the pervasive dread. The isolation continued. The boundary stones still marked the forbidden perimeter, and the outside world remained a distant, cautious rumor. The village breathed, but it held its breath, waiting, watching for any sign that the nightmare was truly, finally, receding into history. As the bitter winter of 1666 began to release its grip, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts started to occur in Eyam. The first hesitant whispers of renewal began to permeate the scarred landscape. A robin's song, clearer and more confident than it had been for months, broke the oppressive silence. Green shoots of new life cautiously pushed through the frozen earth, and the first buds swelled on the bare branches of trees. These were not grand pronouncements of victory, but quiet, hopeful affirmations from the natural world. Villagers began to tentatively emerge from their homes, some even risking a cautious smile. The sheer absence of new deaths, day after day, week after week, slowly began to rebuild a fragile sense of hope, allowing Eyam to glimpse a future beyond the shadow of the plague. Finally, in November of 1666, the momentous decision was made. The quarantine, which had held Eyam in its chilling embrace for 14 long months, was officially declared over. The physical seal was broken. Imagine the emotional release, a mixture of profound relief and an almost surreal trepidation. Villagers cautiously approached the boundary stones that had so long represented their prison and their salvation, perhaps touching them one last time. The first tentative steps were taken to reconnect with the outside world, to establish contact with neighboring communities who had watched, horrified, from afar. Eyam had survived, a village reborn from the ashes of unimaginable sacrifice. They emerged into a new world, forever changed by their defiance, a testament to the extraordinary power of collective will and sacrifice in the face of absolute despair. The silence that fell upon Eyam in late 1666 was not one of peace, but of profound exhaustion and loss. Of the original 350 inhabitants who had chosen to seal themselves off, a devastating 260 had perished. Survivors, emaciated and grief-stricken, began to emerge from homes that had become tombs, their faces etched with unspeakable trauma. The air, once thick with the stench of death, now carried the faint scent of wood smoke as the handful of remaining families cautiously rekindled their hearths. Fields lay fallow, workshops stood idle, and the church bells, once a daily comfort, had fallen silent for months. Eyam was physically scarred, its population decimated, but the emotional wounds ran even deeper. This was not a return to normalcy, but the arduous birth of a new reality, a community forever altered by the crucible of their sacrifice. The true weight of Eyam's decision lies not just in its internal suffering, but in the profound altruism it embodied. Their choice, orchestrated by figures like Rector William Mompesson and Thomas Stanley, was a conscious, agonizing act of self-sacrifice. By erecting an invisible barrier around their homes, preventing anyone from entering or leaving for 14 long months, they became an impenetrable fortress against the plague's merciless advance. While 260 souls perished within the village confines, countless lives in surrounding Derbyshire towns and beyond were spared. This wasn't merely survival. It was an act of profound, selfless public health, a medieval community placing the greater good above individual safety. Eyam's story is a harrowing testament to the human capacity for courage, an enduring echo of sacrifice that saved entire regions from the Black Death's relentless grip. Centuries before germ theory or modern epidemiology, the villagers of Eyam intuitively grasped principles that would become cornerstones of public health. Their self-imposed quarantine, driven by desperate necessity and moral conviction, stands as one of history's most compelling examples of epidemic control. It demonstrated, unequivocally, the effectiveness of isolation in containing a deadly contagion. The Eyam story teaches us the vital role of community cooperation, swift decision-making, and unwavering resolve when faced with an existential threat. From tracing the source, believed to be flea-infested cloth from London, to establishing food drop-off points at designated boundary stones, their improvised protocols prefigured modern public health strategies. Eyam's heartbreaking legacy offers invaluable, timeless lessons, underscoring that collective action remains our most potent weapon against unseen enemies. Eyam, the plague village, is more than just a tragic footnote in history. It's a profound narrative woven into the fabric of human resilience. Its legacy isn't solely of death, but of an extraordinary triumph of the human spirit. The courage displayed by those Derbyshire villagers in 1665 to 1666, their willingness to sacrifice their own lives for the well-being of strangers, continues to resonate, reminding us of the immense power of community and empathy. Today, visitors walk its peaceful streets, reflecting at the church and numerous memorials, each a silent testament to the lives lost and the noble choice made. Eyam's story serves as a powerful, enduring beacon, a poignant lesson passed down through generations. In the face of unimaginable adversity, self-sacrifice, unity, and unwavering resolve can indeed defy death and leave an indelible mark on humanity. We have journeyed through the harrowing and deeply human story of Eyam, a small village that, against all odds, chose an impossible path. From the unwitting arrival of the Black Death, carried by a single bolt of cloth, to the villagers' extraordinary decision to quarantine themselves, sealing their fate to protect countless others. It has been a testament to courage beyond measure. We have witnessed the immense cost, the tragic loss of over 2/3 of its inhabitants, each death a heart-wrenching sacrifice. Yet, from the ashes of unimaginable grief, Eyam forged a legacy of profound lessons. Their story speaks volumes about the power of community, the unwavering spirit of self-sacrifice, and the enduring resilience of the human heart. It is a stark reminder that even in the darkest of times, when fear threatens to consume us, the bonds of solidarity can illuminate a path forward. The choices made in Eyam centuries ago resonate with startling clarity even today, urging us to reflect on our collective responsibility in times of crisis. The brave souls of that isolated Derbyshire village remind us that true strength lies not just in survival, but in the selfless acts we undertake for the greater good. Eyam stands as an eternal monument to the enduring human spirit, a village that, though ravaged, ultimately conquered death through an extraordinary act of life.